What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Two Guys Talk Sports podcast presented by Mr. G's Podcast Productions. In this episode, we're going to take you through the NFL draft and some notable picks, and also give you guys a little MLB April recap. In addition, Oliver and I are going to also give you our opinions on a current NBA dream starting five.
But before we get into that, let's discuss the number of the day. This episode, the number is 13 for Clemson's Christian Wilkins, who was a draft pick in the first round. Unlike most draftees who just waltz on stage to shake the hands of supervillain Roger Goodell, Wilkins decided he was going to switch it up, take a little different approach. He went airborne towards the commissioner. He was looking for a shoulder bump. Now, this is the energy I like to see at the NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta love that. Not only did Wilkins look like an absolute savage shoulder bumping Roger Goodell, but I mean, you could see the fear in Goodell's eyes when he was coming out and he was like, "What's this guy doing? Oh, God." So, I mean, that was a fun way to start the draft off hot.
Anyways, that's enough from us for the intro, so let's just get right into it. We're going to start with the MLB recap. My team, the Red Sox, not looking so hot. They had a great win against the Athletics last night, comeback win. But besides that, what are you looking at in the MLB? Who's been surprising you? Who are you a little disappointed in?
As you said, your team's not doing too hot. My team is not doing too hot either. The Yankees are hot garbage right now. Everyone's injured. I mean, the MLB, it's April. Who really cares that much? But on the bright side, Cody Bellinger of the Dodgers is leading the MLB with a .427 batting average, which is just ridiculous. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, he's also leading the MLB in RBI, and he's tied with Christian Yelich with 14 home runs. Just a pretty incredible start to the season. I will be really interested to see if, like most people, he kind of goes into a slump at some point during the year, cools down a little bit, because I really just can't see this being sustainable for a full season, obviously. But I think what he's doing right now is really impressive, and honestly just kind of put the rest of the MLB on notice, because this was a guy that, if you asked a lot of players at the start of the year, this wouldn't be the guy who they picked to be the front runner for NL MVP right now, but he clearly is.
Yeah, I believe he has, 14 home runs with Christian Yelich and something around 36 RBIs, so he's just been killing it as of late.
And they actually just tied a record with Albert Pujols and I believe one other player with the most home runs before the end of April with 14.
Not bad. I mean, so like we said before, it's baseball, it's April. Who really cares? Let's get into the draft.
Okay, so the NFL draft began last Thursday. I know you watched a good amount of it. I was definitely watching some of it. Kyler Murray goes number 1 overall, just like a lot of people expected. The odds for that were kind of plummeting as we got closer and closer to the draft. Kyler Murray allegedly missed a community service event before the draft, which he claims that he was never signed up for. People in the NFL say otherwise. Not exactly a good look, but he ends up going number 1 overall to the Cardinals. And Cliff Kingsbury decided to trade the quarterback that they took last year, number 10 overall, to the Miami Dolphins. I really can't see how you would think that Kyler Murray's a better fit for this air raid offense that Cliff Kingsbury runs than as opposed to Josh Rosen. I think Josh Rosen's really smart player, really good player in a pretty awful situation. I don't think that situation is going to improve for Kyler Murray.
Yeah, Josh Rosen really was not set up to succeed in his first year in Arizona. I forget what the stat was exactly, but he was pressured, I think, the most by any quarterback in the NFL. Barely had any time to get the ball off. And, I mean, Cliff Kingsbury does think that Kyler Murray is going to be able to succeed in his, run-and-gun air raid offense, but without that O-line, just going to be like Josh Rosen, so.
Exactly. If I remember correctly, the Cardinals didn't take a offensive lineman in the draft, which is surprising to me because in an air raid offense, you have to wait for your receivers to get down the field. If your quarterback has no protection, you're never going to get to that point.
Looks like Kyler Murray is going to be rolling out of the pocket quite a bit this year.
Then, as we move on to number 4 in the draft, the Raiders stunned pretty much everybody by taking Clelin Ferrell.
Who?
At number 4. This was a guy that they projected to go late first round, early second round at best. And another very similar guy would be Daniel Jones, who the Giants drafted. And as many people said, I would agree with this, his film was more of a day 2 quarterback. And there were definitely some better guys left on the board.
Yeah, the Giants passed on Dwayne Haskins at number 6, and then actually he ended up falling to number 15 to the Redskins, staying in the division. So he's going to be playing the Giants twice a year, which should be funny. And a quote by Haskins, when they were interviewing him after he got drafted, he said, "The NFL done messed up." So I guess now he's playing with a little bit larger of a chip on his shoulder than he was before.
I mean, yeah, I can't wait to see these battles between Haskins and the Giants. I really wish that Odell Beckham had stayed in the division, because then you have that Beckham-Josh Norman matchup, and then you would have Haskins going against the Giants, and I think there would just be a lot of fireworks in that game. One pick that I really liked in this draft, in the first 15 or so picks, was Devin Bush to the Steelers. I think that the Steelers have really been missing a linebacker ever since Ryan Shazier was paralyzed in the game against the Bengals, and I just think that Devin Bush is really that guy who can replace Shazier and fill a huge hole that the Steelers have in their defense.
Yeah, Devin Bush coming out of the University of Michigan and that super, super strong defense that they had going last year with Coach Harbaugh. I think we saw 3 players, at least notably, come out of Michigan so far. We saw Devin Bush, Rashawn Gary, and then later to the Patriots, much later, we had Chase Winovich.
Yeah, I think that just kind of goes to show you that Michigan had a very strong defense last year, and that they have a lot of guys who are really talented, really can make, that these teams think that they can make an impact in the NFL.
Yeah, other than that, the first couple picks of the draft panned out just like we expected. Nick Bosa ended up going second to the 49ers, Quinnen Williams third to the Jets. And then anything surprise you later, like 8 through 15?
One thing that really surprised me was how far Ed Oliver ended up slipping in this draft. This was a guy who last year many people projected to go number 1 overall. And then even going into this draft, I saw people who had him at number 2, people who had him at number 3, people who had him at number 4, and he slides all the way down to 9. I think he's a pretty solid fit in that Bills defense. They don't really have that many playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, or the offensive side of the ball for that matter. So I think that's a really nice pickup for them. They got a guy who's potentially a steal at number 9. Another team that I thought really played this draft pretty well was the Denver Broncos, who ended up trading down to get a later pick, and they ended up still getting their guy Drew Lock later in the draft. I thought that was a really good move by their front office, because they recognized that they didn't need to go out and get Locke in the first round, and that he would still be there later in the draft.
Yeah, I'm still not sure what the Broncos received in exchange for that pick, but I mean, we know that they ended up getting Drew Lock eventually. They got their quarterback, so they should be set for this upcoming season.
So, moving on, we're now going to talk about our current NBA All-Star Dream Team starting 5 lineups. I'll go first. I'll just kind of go through mine position by position. So at point guard, I had Kyrie Irving. I think he has the best handle in the NBA right now. He can shoot the 3, he can get to the rim, knocks down free throws. I think he can work on being a leader a little bit, but when you have a dream team, you don't necessarily need a leader.
This is all hypothetical anyway. Hopefully this isn't happening anytime soon.
If this happened, I think the NBA would be a little bit screwed at that point.
We might have a little issue with tampering, but...
So, for my shooting guard, I was not able to go with one of my favorite players in the NBA, James Harden, because I told Brendan that I was going to pick different players than him. But I went with DeMar DeRozan, who's playing for the Spurs right now, recently traded from the Raptors. He probably has the best mid-range jump shot in the NBA. He's another guy who can really throw it down, athletic, can play some solid defense. At small forward, Giannis Antetokounmpo, I really don't think that there's anybody else that you could put at this position right now. He's pretty much head and shoulders the best small forward in the NBA at this point. If you want to call him a small forward, that is, I guess, 6'11". But the way he gets to the rim and just the way he uses his length is really impressive to me. He can shoot the 3 ball really well. He can space the floor a little bit at least, and I just think that he's probably the best small forward in the NBA. I think one guy who neither of us have, looking at this, is LeBron James, which I think is a little bit interesting. But after the season he had, to be fair, I think he played part of that hurt, but the season that he had, I really just couldn't bring myself to pick him. I don't think he's one of the best 10 players in the NBA anymore. He's kind of starting to age. This is one player that you would pick, and I really just couldn't pick anyone else. I think he's the best player in the NBA right now, which is Kevin Durant. He can just score the ball at will. He can get his shot whenever he wants. And honestly, I don't think there are very many players in the NBA that you can really say that about. I think that Kyrie's another guy who can really just get open and shoot whenever he wants to. But at the same time, that's because of his handle. Kevin Durant doesn't really have that. He does have that one hesitation move that's basically unguardable, but I think you saw in that Houston game, when he wants to score, there's nobody who can do anything about it.
Yeah.
He's going to get those shots. He's going to make them.
He's 6'11" and he can shoot, so that's pretty dangerous for any team.
I think I have a lot of length on my roster between Giannis and KD, but my fifth player, my center, is Nikola Jokic, a guy who's lighting it up right now. He can shoot the three, post God, and he can also pass the ball really well. I don't know if you've seen the highlight, but he had a pass around a guy's back in Game 7 against the Spurs. Last night he had, I think, 37 or 39, 9 assists. He's just ridiculous. There's no other way to put it. We haven't seen a guy in a very long time who can pass the ball like that while also being a quality guy in the post and a guy who can shoot threes, be a pick-and-pop guy. And I think that he's really valuable. He's probably the best center in the NBA right now, in my opinion.
He's a pretty exciting player to watch. You don't typically see the big centers dishing out between the legs behind the back passes. Anyways, I'll get into my starting five. So at point guard, I chose the hot Damian Lillard. I mean, I really couldn't pass up on this. Just had a killer series against the Thunder. I mean, I can just leave it at that. At shooting guard, I have my least favorite player in the NBA, James Harden. I really dislike him, but I can't deny that he's a great player and he always puts up numbers. So if I am making a team, I definitely want him on my team. He always gets to the line, he can shoot the three, he can drive, he can pass, so all around solid player. At small forward, I have Kevin Durant, like we said, we share that one. Very lengthy guy, 6'11", like we said. He can shoot the three, he can shoot the mid-range, he can drive, he can pass. He has that one move, scoring machine basically when he wants. A couple weeks ago, he said, "I'm Kevin Durant, you know who I am," and since then, I forget what the stat is, but he's averaging around 40 points per game. Then at power forward or small forward interchangeably, I have Kawhi Leonard, who's also been tearing it up in the East right now and also giving the Sixers some trouble. Always been a defensive presence. His offense has gotten so much better over the years. Finally out of San Antonio. I don't know how the relationships were with Greg Popovich, but he's been lighting it up recently. Just scored 45 a couple nights ago, and I think Kawhi Leonard is another top player in the NBA at this point. And at center, I have Anthony Davis, who is a free agent right now, I believe, technically on the Pelicans, but he basically did tell them he did not want to come back, so I'm going to treat that as a free agent. Hopefully he doesn't end up at the Lakers, but again, Anthony Davis, just a solid center. Can't pass as well as Jokic, but he's pretty solid, I'd say, so.
Yeah, I think that the Anthony Davis situation is definitely going to be something that we're going to have to monitor. I think that he's a guy who could potentially leave. I'm kind of rooting for him to go to the Lakers just because I would love to see when LeBron finally gets the help he's begging for and then realizes that they just traded every asset that they had to get him, and then the Lakers end up being worse than they were this year.
Yeah,
that would be pretty funny.
I think LeBron is starting to fall off the map little by little now. He moved to the West, took over the Lakers, but no, you can't really compete with the Rockets, the Warriors, the Blazers, the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Spurs.
Yeah, I think that that's one thing that I think a lot of analysts saw coming, but maybe LeBron didn't, which is that you can really take a lot of games off in the Eastern Conference. There are teams that are really not that talented, but when you have to play teams in the Western Conference that are just bringing it every night, I mean, if you look at, like, the Lakers are a team that missed the playoffs this year. They had LeBron James, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, Josh Hart. These are all guys who aren't exactly slouches that you're going to have to go out and play them. And that's a team that didn't even make the playoffs in the Western Conference, which is a little bit scary.
Yeah, the Lakers had trouble. LeBron didn't make the playoffs for the first time in 9 years or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Made it to 8 straight finals or something. So, and then going from that to not even making the playoffs. must be hard on him. So you know he's going to come out next season pretty strong, trying to look for that 7th seed in the West. But I mean, again, like we said, it's really competitive out there, so we'll see how he does it.
Speaking of the playoffs, I think we should talk about a couple of the second round matchups that are going on right now. As we predicted, the Nuggets do end up taking the Spurs through 7 games, but they won that series, and they actually just came out last night and beat the Trailblazers, which I don't think was something we really had predicted, but looking at how well Nikola Jokic is playing right now, if he can get hot, and the Nuggets just seem like they're clicking at the right time right now, which is obviously crucial in the NBA playoffs. It'll be interesting to see how Dame kind of bounces back. And another guy who's interesting to me is CJ McCollum, who I feel like a lot of people forget that he's on the Trailblazers sometimes, but he can definitely bring it as well. That's probably the series that's most interesting to me, and that's one that I'm definitely going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think that series is going to go 7 games no matter what. Personally, I'd like to see the Trailblazers win, just because I think overall Damian Lillard's been lighting it up. But I mean, I would not be mad at all to see the Nuggets pull out a win and advance to the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, it's just so funny to watch Jokic play. He's a little kind of fat and just kind of stumbling down the court sometimes. It's really great to watch, and they have a lot of energy. They have a lot of fun out there.
And then the Celtics made light work of the Bucks in that first game. I don't know how many we won by. What was it, 20?
It was close to 20. I believe it was 18.
I mean, I wasn't watching that game just because, again, I was studying for another Latin test. But you were, I think, a little bit. You texted me to turn it on. I turned it on. They were up by 15, and I was feeling pretty good about myself.
Yeah, I think just as we had kind of talked about, 2 guys that really stood out in that game, Jaylen Brown and Gordon Hayward, were 2 guys who shot the ball well. And like we said, I think those guys are going to be the X factor in this series. You saw Jaylen Brown put Giannis on a poster again. And just, he loves to go at Giannis. I don't know what the history is between them and why he seems to enjoy
probably nothing,
embarrassing
nothing
Giannis so much. But that's obviously really fun to watch. And I think that, like we had talked about a little bit, Al Horford was able to really lock Giannis down for most of the game, and he was shooting very pedestrian numbers. I think that he ended up having, 22 points, but the Celtics will certainly take that version of Giannis over the monster that we saw in the first round, scoring like 35 points a game.
If they shut down Giannis, I think that series can be a wrap for the Celtics.
One guy that's always seems to kill the Celtics on the Bucks is Chris Middleton. I really don't understand it. He's really...
You hate Chris Middleton.
There's nothing special about him whatsoever, and yet he just seems to get these looks against the Celtics.
He's a 3-ball guy. He's just like kind of like a Klay Thompson, but way worse.
Yeah, so Game 2 is tonight in that series. I know I'm definitely going to be watching that.
100%.
If the Celtics can go up 2-0, as Paul Pierce said already, this series is over. I really just think that if the Celtics can lock down Giannis again, there's no coming back from down 2-0 heading to Boston. I think, did you see the comments that he made about going into Game 2? Well, yesterday a reporter asked him, what's your mindset heading into Game 2? And a guy who is a leader for the Bucks, an MVP candidate, his response was, I can't promise you that we're going to win, but I can promise you that we're going to play hard. Which is not exactly what you want to see from the face of your franchise.
I think he's going to take this game into his own hands and just try to win it himself.
One thing that I would like to see is a little bit less of the superstar calls. I think that game was one. The Bucks shot the Celtics on free throws 24-8, which is just kind of ridiculous. I think Kyrie has always been a guy who doesn't get those superstar calls for whatever reason, which is obviously unfortunate. But Giannis, you see him go in the lane, he'll take like 5 steps, they won't call it, and then he'll go up and they'll call a foul. And I just think that at a certain point, you can't bail him out every time, especially when you see in a couple of these other series, like the Rockets-Warriors, for example, which we'll get into in a second, where they weren't getting these superstar calls, and they kind of had more of a playoff environment. In that sense, I really thought that was made for better basketball.
Yeah, definitely the officiating has a lot to play in during these games. And like you said, the Rockets-Warriors series is something else, but we'll get to that in a minute. Next up in the East, we have the Raptors versus the Sixers. And as of now, the series is tied 1-1 because that win for the Sixers last night. What do you think about that series?
I don't know if you saw the end of the game, but Kawhi had a loose ball kicked out to him. He could have pulled a three. He passed it to Danny Green. Danny Green ended up missing the three. Danny Green's a guy who can really shoot the ball. I think you live and die by that shot. That could have sent it to OT. And I think that they need to do a better job guarding a couple guys on the Sixers. Jimmy Butler absolutely killed them last night. Joel Embiid was sick, but he was basically a non-factor in that game. Honestly, the person who's going to be the death of the Raptors is very clearly Kyle Lowry. I think he had 22 points last night, but he sucks. There's no other way to put it. He really cannot perform in the playoffs.
There was a video on Barstool of him at the very last play trying to go between the legs of, I think, Jimmy Butler or whoever was defending him. And the caption was, "Is Kyle Lowry playing drunk right now?" Because, I mean, he hasn't been his best. He scored 0 points last series.
He scored 0 points in Game 1 when they lost to the Magic.
And then, I mean, from there, it's just kind of been full-time hate on Kyle Lowry. So, I mean, 22 is not bad, but if you watch him play throughout the game, he's really a non-factor.
Yeah, and I mean, I only watched the fourth quarter of that game, but I just saw he scored 9 points in the fourth quarter. They were all three-pointers, and they were basically just because at that point Philadelphia was like, well, just leave him open. He can shoot it all he wants, and he ended up knocking down 3 of them. But he's just...
That's YMCA League right there. All right, and then lastly, we have the Rockets and the Warriors. What do you think about that first game?
I mean, as a fan of basketball in general, I was kind of a little bit frustrated by the lack of calls. I think that there's a certain point where, yes, players did start flopping towards the end of the game, but that was generated by some non-calls in the beginning, and I'm really, really intrigued to see how Game 2 goes in this series because now we have one of the premier NBA referees, Tony Brothers, coming in. He's sure to screw up at least 10 calls, and I just can't wait to see what Mike D'Antoni and the rest of the Rockets do because, honestly, they've kind of just been getting screwed.
Yeah, James Harden normally isn't the one to be getting screwed as he averaged around, 20 free throws a game in the regular season. But I do have to hand it to him for trying to deal with these referees. I mean, in the press conference, he said he just wants a fair chance. I don't really know the rule with landing space for closing out on players, but in some scenarios, you could see Klay Thompson bumping him before he came to the ground, just landing in his zone where he put his feet. And then at the end, that last play, Draymond Green, actually, I thought that was a clean contest, but after the ones before, earlier in the game, I mean, even that, he's like, maybe I'll get a call on this one, maybe the next one, but never got him.
That final call, you saw James Harden kind of jump into Draymond Green, but at the same time, Draymond Green, honestly, in my opinion, did a pretty fantastic job fouling him, but also selling it as a non-foul. He basically turned around, put his arms up, and then stuck his butt into James Harden. I mean, if that's how you want to play the game, then that's how they can play it. You saw there were guys like Steph Curry didn't have the greatest game, Klay Thompson didn't have the greatest game. Draymond Green played pretty well, and Kevin Durant obviously kept them in it. But I think, honestly, the biggest factor in this series is James Harden. You saw that the Rockets were away, and this was a very winnable game, despite the fact that James Harden shot, I think, 25%. Pretty bad shooting day by anyone's numbers, certainly by James Harden's, and he was still able to score 35. And they only lost this game by 4.
Yeah, Game 2 should be exciting. Is that tonight? Game 2?
I'm not sure. I believe so.
Whenever it is, it should be exciting because now we have angry fat James Harden and Chris Paul, who got ejected at the end of that game. He got a technical. And then angry Mike D'Antonio. So it should be interesting to see how the Rockets try to bounce back after that tough Game 1 loss against the Warriors.
Okay, guys, thanks for tuning into the Two Guys Talk Sports podcast presented by Mr. G's Podcast Productions. Next week, we're going to be heading into May, and what comes with that is May Madness in college lacrosse, so we're going to be talking about that a little bit. We'll also give you a little bit of a recap on the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, And something I'm really excited for, we're going to debate the who should be the NBA MVP a little bit. Something that Brendan and I definitely do not agree on.